Do not confuse this with treatment or mental health advice or direction. Nothing on this podcast is made to supplement or supersede the relationship and direction of your mental health caretakers. Although David Kozlowski is a licensed marriage and family therapist, he is not functioning as a certified mental health professional in this environment. And same applies to any professional who may appear on the OG Therapy podcast. Welcome to the OG Therapy.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of OG Therapy. And as always, I'm going to be talking to you about relationships, good ones, bad ones, how to deal with them. But today we have a little bit of a different episode. Today's episode is going to be definitely very bitter. And I'm going to I'm going to end it sweet, meaning having some information and some understanding that you can leave with to help you go back to your kids' schools, to help you go to your own jobs and places of employment, to be able to share this information with them so that they can see what they can do in their own organizations to create more emotional and mental stability with students, with employees, what have you. And what I'm referring to right now is, and I've done one current event recently, but I don't usually do current events. But in this particular case, I wanted to do a current event. And it saddens me to talk about this because in our day and age today, this happens far too often. And I'm referring to school shootings. Many of you, by the time you hear this, you have probably heard that in Georgia, there was another school shooting. Was it today or last night? Yesterday. It was yesterday, right? They got the full numbers and reports today. So there was a school shooting yesterday, which was September 4th. And a little bit of background information, details about it. And also a little trigger warning for you parents and you people out there listening to this that have had loved ones or family members that have been affected by some sort of shooting, some sort of violence. Just want to give you a little warning because I'm going to be giving you just kind of the details of the information in case you're not privy to what's been going on, in case you haven't heard the details on the news yet. As of right now, this occurred in Atlanta, Georgia, like I said, in Winder, Georgia. The name of the high school is Appalachia High School. And the shooter's name is Colt Gray. I believe he surrendered afterwards. Unlike most school shooters, they're usually killed by the law enforcement or they take their own life. This young man is still alive. And unfortunately, there are 4 people who have passed away and 9 in the hospital and 30 total people have been injured. I think it's very important to say the people's names that have passed away. Having worked with lots of people who have passed away or have had people that have loved ones that have passed away, I think it's a big mistake to not mention the people's names, to not acknowledge their passing. So I just want to acknowledge my heart goes out to the family, friends, loved ones, community members of Mason Sherma. Hopefully I pronounced this right. Shermahorn, 14 years old, and Christian Angulo, 14 years old. Also Richard Aspinwall, 39, and Christina Irimi. Gosh, I should have practiced the pronunciation before this, but Christina Irimi, 53 years old. The first 2, Mason and Christian, were both fellow students at the school, and Richard Aspinwall was a teacher there as well, but also the defensive coordinator for the high school football team. And Christina Irimi, 53, she was the math teacher. That was actually the class where the kid was actually in that class. Apparently, according to the story, and hopefully, I'm getting this information mostly accurate. If there's more information that comes out that is different than what I'm saying, I apologize. But as of right now, the information I was able to gather is that the student left the classroom, went to get, it says an AR rifle, AR style rifle, which usually means, I don't know this for sure, it usually means it was not an AR, but it was a rifle that looked like an AR. It could, maybe pass off as an AR, but that's neither here nor there. And apparently he left to get the weapon, came back, and the school has a new system that every time someone leaves the class, the doors lock behind them. And then the teacher has to be able to let someone in. And they actually did that, according to my understanding, to help prevent from school shootings happening. And so that's the general information about the people who were involved, about the story that happened. And apparently when he came back to the classroom, the teacher went to open up the door. And he immediately, because he had the rifle, immediately started to open fire. And apparently, obviously, the bullets hit the teacher. And kids or people that were there, they closed the door, so he was not able to get into the classroom, thankfully. But unfortunately, and definitely not thankfully, the math teacher lost her life and saved probably a lot of kids' lives inside that classroom because of her actions. There's a couple officers that were there at the school that apparently were able to act and get involved. And I think there were resource officers at the school. I saw some pictures of them today. And obviously they're heroes in the situation because they risked their own lives to save the lives of other people. But as I mentioned, the unfortunate passing of those 4 people and the many other injured people, hopefully no one else injuries result in them having major lifelong issues or passing away as well. So those officers are definitely being held up as heroes for the situation, as they should be. This is a hard thing to talk about. I'm very thankful and fortunate here in our area of Utah that none of my kids' schools or anyone that I know has been affected by a school shooter. But as I mentioned, this is far too common. This beginning of this school year, and I'd hear jokes from students talking about, hopefully there's not a school shooter situation. We've had a couple scares, a couple people threatened to bring a weapon, and the school was shut down, the school that I teach at, and the authorities were alerted. Fortunately, nothing has ever actually happened. So as I mentioned before, I don't have any personal experience with this, but studying this very closely, even ever since Columbine back in the day, I've just had a curiosity about why this is happening. So I want to do this podcast today, you guys, to first and foremost let everybody know what's going on, to weigh in on it, and also to give my condolences to the families of those people I've just mentioned who have passed away and those people who are injured, and all the kids, the staff, the administration, the janitors, everybody at the high school, everybody at the community that now has to grieve and mourn, and many of which, rightfully so, are very traumatized by what took place. After saying all that, I want to get to my thoughts and what I believe and I've seen in the change of cultures in high schools. What I know to be true is that there is a solution to the suicide epidemic and the high school shooter or school shooter epidemic that our country's been dealing with for many years now, and unfortunately it's not getting any better and it's not going away. You know, when I speak to high school administrators, when I speak to teachers and students, I usually get, not students. This does happen to students, but not as frequently, but let's focus on high school administrators and teachers. When I do teaching, when I do trainings, when I do presentation to them, I'll get at least 1 or 2 questions that have to do with how do we keep our kids safe at school from themselves and from other kids who are potentially mentally and emotionally unstable that could possibly, shoot up the school or attempt to harm or cause harm to their classmates. And those questions come in all different shapes and all different types of versions of those questions. But really what it kind of comes down to is people are wondering, from my experience, what do I think can be of help or would be the starting of some sort of system to prevent these, or at least drastically decrease the number of suicides, the number of suicide attempts, and the number of kids who act out school shooting, or the number of kids who even consider to harming anyone at the school. And I always answer in a very specific way, but I've never done it on a podcast. Well, I take that back. A couple weeks ago, I did a podcast that it's similar to what I'm about to talk about today. And that podcast was about the young man who had attempted to assassinate President Trump. And I'm going to share a few things that overlap with that podcast, but mostly this podcast is going to be a standalone podcast in regards to, I'm going to tell you what I believe is the solution. And like I said, at least drastically decrease the probability of something like this happening and potentially stopping this from happening. And what that is a terminology that I came up with a long time ago with the help of many teenagers. And the terminology I'm referring to is called social health. When I've talked to administrators and I've talked to teachers and they ask me these questions, I tell them that this is actually not a mental health problem. This is a social health problem that has very serious mental health side effects. And if you've been a listener of mine, have heard me speak before, you usually heard me say that phrase because I get questions about like, what's the cause of the suicide epidemic? And I tell them the suicide epidemic, the suicide issues, mental health problems, they're not actually mental health problems. That's just the way they manifest themselves. The real root of the problem, from my professional diagnosing the situation and having been worked in the mental health industry for almost 27 years now, I've seen that the problem is very simple and very clear. However, we do not have any systems or any things put in place to specifically treat the problem because unknowingly we've been treating the smoke and not the fire. So here's the problem. The problem is our society, but more specifically our youth, more so now than ever. Obviously, what I'm about to say is not referring to everybody in our society, and I'm not referring to all students and all youth. But now more than ever, we have a lack of social health. When there is not good social health in schools, in communities, in families, in businesses, there is not good chemistry. Now, I use the word chemistry because I think most everybody listening to this podcast knows that if you work in an environment or if you're on some sort of sports team or some sort of job function where you have to work with other people to get the job done, it is very crucial, very important, very vital for there to be good chemistry if you want to come up with good ideas, if you want everybody to be on the same page and everybody to clearly understand and communicate what their roles are and what the objective of the team, the group is. In any social situation, family, work, like I said, sports teams, the chemistry really determines the energy, determines the direction. And so when people say we have good chemistry, what are they really saying? Well, in my estimation and what I pick up from it, what they're saying is that we have great ideas. We come up with solutions to problems that are realistic because everyone that's involved in creating the solutions all have a say and we all respect one another. Even if we don't agree with each other, we have a certain amount of respect that allows us to at least consider, think about, and listen to the people who are talking. Sometimes our minds can be changed by a persuasive argument, or maybe not an argument. Maybe just someone brings up new information. Maybe someone enlightens you with things that you didn't know, you didn't see before. And if you trust the person has good intentions, if you trust the person is not trying to be disgruntled and screw things up, well, then you're going to hear the person out. You're going to consider what they say. They're going to have the ability to influence you. If someone has the ability to influence you, and if they have the ability to cause you to think differently, that's good. Doesn't mean you necessarily change your mind, you agree with them, but that means, like I said, you respect them and you're considering their thoughts, feelings, opinions, and all the things that they want to accomplish and they want to do. So having good social health, by definition, well, let me give you the definition of social health in case you haven't heard me talk about it in a podcast before. The definition of social health is one's ability to build, maintain, and improve mutually beneficial relationships with all the following, but not limited to: family, friends, online relationships, relationship with technology, relationship with coworkers, relationship with peers, relationship with your environment, because your environment determines how you act and how you behave more times than not. You're going to have you're going to act and behave differently if you're at church versus if you're at a party. You're going to act differently and behave differently in math class versus at your best friend's house. So your environment does determine a lot about your connectivity and what sides of yourself you're going to show or feel comfortable showing to people. And also what parts of you, like if you're in a job situation, you might just need to shut up and just do your job. People may not just want to listen to all your complaints and all your gripes. So, and then the last one, of course, is the relationship with self. So in social health, I teach all my students, and I teach people, teachers, administrators, whoever's listening or whoever's paid me to talk to them about this. I teach them that one of the most important things about social health is you have to understand the importance of the word relationship. And when I say you have to understand the importance of the word relationship, you'd have to understand what the definition really means. So the definition I found that I really like the most is that a relationship is a connection between two or more people, places, objects, things, and thoughts. It is the essence of any connection. So you have a relationship with your past. You have a relationship with your brother, your sister. You have a relationship with your friends, your family members. You have a relationship with your shoes. You have a relationship with your school. And you also have relationships with individual subjects and individual people and individual classes at your school. Relationships go much further than just dating and friends and family members. It's really any connection between two or more, like I said, people, places, objects, thoughts, and things. And if you look at, or at least if I look at it, and a lot of my clients and people, my students, when I encourage people to look at relationships in that manner, they see it as it's a part of every single thing in their life. You have a relationship with sleep. Some of you listening to this podcast are in a very contentious, chaotic, maybe an abusive relationship with sleep. Some of you, not some of you, we all have a relationship with food. I know for me, when I get really stressed out and nervous, my food consumption goes either way up or it goes way down. I'm either not eating anything or I'm just sitting there shoving things in my mouth nonstop. Granted, different situations determine whether I eat more. Some situations determine whether I don't eat at all. My point is that we have relationships with lots of things. So I want you to think for the rest of this podcast and the rest of your life, I really want you to see relationships by the definition I just shared with you instead of just intimate relationships that you date or are related to. Now, the reason why I bring up relationships as such a key component to social health is because from my research, when I say my research, me reading research, studying research, and from my own personal professional experience, I've come up with a terminology or a phrase just to help me remember the basic concepts of how important relationships are to our social health. And that is a simple saying, and you might have heard this from me again, but again, if you haven't, thought it'd be worth repeating. And that is life is all about one thing and one thing only, relationships. The quality of the relationships you have in your life at any given time in your life will always determine the quality of your life at that particular moment. So if you're going through really something difficult in your life, let's say a bad breakup, you lost a job, or maybe you're struggling in some way, shape, or form. When you go through difficult times in life, and you do not have substantial fortifying relationships, people that understand you, they understand who you are at your core, they don't necessarily judge you for mistakes or errors that you've made, and they just really believe in you as a person despite the issues you've had. They will show up for you and they'll support you through those difficult times, even if it was your fault. Those relationships can sustain someone until they get back on their feet, until their strength, both mental, emotional, and physical, returns to them, and then they can get through said difficult time. Well, if someone doesn't have close, fortified relationships and they go through a hard time in life, well, then obviously it's going to be 10 times harder to deal with that because you're going to have a lot of people who don't understand you. You're going to be getting advice from people that may not understand your situation, or you may be, talking to people who don't necessarily have your best interest. So when I say life is all about relationships, based upon the definition of relationships I just told you guys, I don't think that's a stretch at all. People, places, objects, things, this is what our whole entire life is about. Think of how many times you've done things for other relationships in your life that you had no intention to do for yourself. The thing I can think of is moving. I hate moving, but I've helped more people move. That's been the biggest service I've ever done for my family and friends. I've helped so many people move. And every person I helped moved, they were extraordinarily grateful and appreciative. And they knew, whether they were paid me back or not, they knew that they owed me a solid, that I did something for them that they did not want to do for themselves. But by me doing that for them, it makes them want to return the favor back to me. Even if I'm not moving, they just want to be there for me someday. And they want me to reach out to them if I ever need anything. In fact, everyone I've ever helped moved is like, if I can ever repay you back, let me know. They'd want to sometimes give me money. I'm like, no, if you give me money, then you might as well just pay a professional mover. Just give me a couple slices of pizza, we'll call it even, right? In these exchanges, It's basically a social contract that we have with other human beings. Social contracts can only be formed by two people that both acknowledge and understand that they need one another in order for their life to be more bearable, more manageable, and more successful. Relationships with coaches is a good example because they have knowledge and information, and they have a mantle, they have an authority position where they can help you prepare yourself so that you can perform at the highest level. But they need you too. They need you to buy into what they're doing, believe in them, so that you will give your best effort. And when they give you criticism, if you believe that they are on your side and they want what's best for you and want what's best for the team, then you'll be able to take that criticism a whole lot easier than if they were just to yell instructions and information at you and make you feel bad about yourself. I've had lots of coaches that, when they yelled at me, I actually didn't take it personal. And when I think back about why I didn't take it personal, it's because they went out of their way to make it so that it wasn't personal. Meaning, when I wasn't at practice, they treated me great. They talked to me. They gave me their time and attention. They gave me, special treatment if I was having a rough day and I needed it. And then they were hard on me when I needed it as well. But they always circled back around to check in with me to make sure that I was doing okay and to let me know and remind me that they care about me. Those are the type of coaches where, you do anything for. But on the other hand, if you have a coach who just gives you the ice grill and the silent treatment, and they only talk to you when you make a mistake, you're always so uncertain of your place and your role in that relationship. It's difficult for you to just be normal. It's difficult for you to take risks and take chances. It's going to be probably very anxiety filled for you. It may get you down and hard on yourself to the point where you may not want to try anymore. So relationships, fortifying mutually beneficial relationships, requires you having to even know that relationships should be mutually beneficial. When you have coaches, when you have teachers, when you have people in your life who do not see it that way, and they're only focused on you got to do what they tell you to do, and that's it. And if you don't do what they tell you to do, then you're being insubordinate, you're a problem, and they need to somehow remove you from the team. Obviously, those relationships, are going to be a little bit harder, more challenging, cause more stress for you. So now back to social health. The solution, and yes, I am saying the solution. I know this can be controversial. The solution to decrease school shootings, suicides, and any sort of mental and emotional distress that are happening in our schools is to implement systems that are based, or at least fly underneath the banner of the two words social health. Back to me speaking to administrators and principals and stuff, I gave one particular presentation about a year and a half ago to all the main principals in junior high schools and high schools here in the state of Utah. And this was my introduction to social health to all these educators. They'd heard I was doing something. They knew I was speaking at this conference, and there's whispers about this thing called social health, but they really had no idea what it was. They didn't know if it was a sales pitch, if I was trying to sell them on my curriculum or whatever. But, they're in the audience, and, they had to sit there and they had to listen to me. They didn't have a choice. But many people came up to me afterwards and told me how pleasantly surprised they were, and that the information I just shared was exactly what they were trying to implement in their school. They just all called it something totally different. So I told them the story how I came up with social health with a bunch of kids in local community support groups, and now that turned into a nonprofit organization. And then we took all the information of over a decade of weekly meetings with these kids, which were all free. They were all, no one was mandated by courts to be there. Their parents enforced them to be there. Every single one of the kids that came to these groups, they did it by their own free will. And a lot of them came because a friend invited them. They fell in love with it and they kept on coming. Once I started to figure out that this was working in these groups, I was then hired by Harriman High School to do a similar thing, but to take those groups and all the information I've learned in social health and to put it into a core class curriculum. Now, this was much different than the regular social and emotional learning curriculums that were either an add-on or like a behavioral, credit, some sort of elective. This class, the subject social health, was really what the class was all about, helping them determine how to build and fortify healthy, mutually beneficial relationships was something that was very foreign to these kids. They'd learned about social emotional learning. They'd learned about depression. They'd learned about anxiety. They learned about, how you're supposed to be nice to people, and a lot of just ideas and thoughts and information. But what they're lacking, from my estimation, was the practice and the application of that information in a real life situation that was monitored and was able to, like, teachers were able to give guidance in those situations. So a lot of times we teach kids things in class and then they have to go home and then we just tell them to do it on their own. When I'm referring to this, I'm referring to like social, emotional, and depression, stuff like that. But if you teach a kid about depression and how that could lead to suicide, they go home with that information. They now know something they didn't have, which is good. However, that does not help them if a friend is suicidal or if they're suicidal, how to deal with it and also how to talk to a friend. Now, I'm not saying that there's not steps that schools show and classes and curriculum show that says things like, step one, if your friend, confesses that they're suicidal, if you're worried they're suicidal, ask them if they're suicidal. If they admit that they are, then reach out, call the suicide hotline, call their parents. So there's lots of things to do. But people are not just regular things. They're not just objects that you could just move from one mood to the other. It's much more complex than that. People usually only open up and share deep personal information with someone that they're comfortable with, someone that they forge a relationship with. Now, if things are bad enough and they're desperate enough, they can talk to a stranger. They'll call the suicide hotline, or here at Utah, we have the Safe UT app. I'm not saying they won't do those things, and I love those services, and I'm glad that those services exist. However, you're more likely, when I say you, meaning teenagers and people out there, are more likely to open up and share their deepest, darkest thoughts, feelings, fears, secrets, what have you, to someone that have already proven over time can handle that information, won't freak out, and that they can trust. In my career, I was very frustrated and have been very frustrated up until a few years ago that as a teacher, as a therapist, as people that work in education and mental health, as parents and coaches, we're responsible for the mental and emotional well-being and physical well-being of our students, our clients, the kids on our team, whatever it is you're doing. We're responsible for them. And other people, teachers and other coaches, are also responsible for them. The parents are, of course, responsible. But even though we share this responsibility, we rarely share knowledge and information that we learn about these kids when they're in our presence, when we are in charge or when we are responsible for them. So I liken this to another issue that we have in mental health. One of the biggest issues I believe we have in mental health is that mental health, in my opinion, is still kind of treated like the redheaded stepchild of physical health. What I mean by that, it's not taken as serious, even though it's very serious. Part of that is not to blame the mental health industry, because the mental health industry is not a person, it's an industry. And it's hard to blame them or put blame on them because mental health, unlike physical health, it's not as tangible. We have identifying markers, we have characteristics and traits that we look for to diagnose someone, to see what their problems are. But it's not something you can put under an x-ray. You can't touch it, feel it, smell it. You can't use your normal senses. And so it does elude people at times. And sometimes coaches, and especially teachers that I teach in my trainings, they'll come up to me and say, hey, I saw this kid in my class the other day that's self-harm wounds on their arm, and I want to go talk to them, and I got distracted, and then something happens, and now it's a couple days or a week later, and now it's almost like, do I say anything? The kid came back to class, and they seem to be all right. Like, do I talk to the school counselor about it? And if I do, what is the school counselor gonna do? Well, one of the biggest issues that I've seen is that there's a lack of communication because there's a lack of a system to make communication easier. Nobody wants to start a conversation with someone that's going to ask a bunch of questions, someone that's going to derail what your real point is and get you off your game to the point where you're thinking, never mind, I'll just figure it out on my own. Now, obviously, not all conversations go like that, but the stressful conversations that many of us get involved with our family and friends come from the frustration that the person does not understand what we're trying to communicate to them. So I felt it was up to me, since no one else had come up with a system or a way to easily identify and to communicate in layman's terms where a kid is at mentally and emotionally. So one day I was talking and complaining to one of my friends, and I was telling him, yeah, man, I'm so sick of this, because it was one of my buddies who asked me about the mental health issues and all the challenges we have in our country as kids right now, or with kids right now in our country. And I was just kind of complaining about the stuff. And he's like, why do you think that is? And I go, wow, there's no system. I was telling him everything that we're talking about right now. But then I just told him, I go, it's frustrating because like I wish someone would come up with a system similar to what they use in the medical industry for cancer. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, in cancer, they got stage 1, stage 2, three, stage 4. And he was like, oh, that's right, cancer. Okay, yeah, stage 4 means that's not good. You're probably going to die or death is an option, right? Stage 3, not as bad. Stage 2, even less bad. Stage 1, whew, thank goodness we caught it at stage 1. If you catch it at stage 1, it's a whole lot better than catching it at stage 2, 3, or 4. So I told my friend, I said, man, if it was like that way in mental health, we could easily communicate, or at least more easily communicate and more effectively communicate about where people are at. So if someone were to leave one school and transfer to another school, you could easily communicate, hey, this kid is at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4. And my friend said, he's like, wow, that's a great idea to do that mental health. That, especially since you can't see it, touch it, feel it, smell it, that'd really help make it more tangible, and people could look at this chart and look at the scale. Then they could say, hey, listen, I'm doing an IEP, individual education plan. I'm doing this for a kid that struggles in these academic areas. However, behavioral, this kid's at a stage 2 or 3. This would make it so much easier to be able to communicate to coaches, to parents, to administrators, teachers, where our children and where these kids are at, so that we're not caught off guard. Now, to help you guys get a better visual of that, what I'm going to do right now is I'm not going to do it. I'm going to have my handy assistant / producer / right-hand man / the guy that pushes all the buttons. Sometimes he presses record, sometimes he doesn't, so we got to re-record it, but that's okay because I like to hear myself talk, apparently. He's going to put up a visual on this. So if you're watching this on YouTube or on Patreon, you'll be able to see the stages that I created. But right now I'm going to quickly go over the stages and then we'll wrap up this podcast. And then I'll tell you what you guys can do to take this information back to your schools. Give it to everybody. Just give me credit for it. Okay. There's a little watermark of mine on this. So, just don't try to erase my name and say, oh, we made this up on our own, or change a little bit here or there. I'm the professional. I got the licenses. Just go ahead and give me credit for it. That's all I ask. I don't need to get paid for this. I want everybody to use this. So I'll go and put that up right now. And then I'm going to go over the stages with you guys in just a moment. All right. So here are the stages. Now, as you can see, we made some nice little emojis to kind of illustrate the different mood and emotions so that you get a little bit of visual and not just the information. So one thing I want to tell you guys before I get into the stages is that one thing that I found out that was missing in the mental health stages that were, some people had tried to do some mental health stages. Let's put it that way. Okay. Those stages were not impressive, and they lacked something that I felt was so simple that I could see why people missed it. See, mental health is the diagnosis, the identifying, diagnosis, and treatment of mental and emotional problems. So by definition, there has to be a problem to treat someone with mental health. I do not, walk through the grocery store and look at people that have a disgruntled look on their face, or maybe they got a little RBF or something, and say, hey, are you in need of a therapist? Because you look like you have some mental health problems. Okay? It does not work like that. If you see someone in a parking lot and they're bleeding profusely from their thigh area, and you're like, wow, that looks like they probably hit an artery and they're going to probably bleed to death, you could easily say, hey, looks like you have some physical health problems. You might need some help, a tourniquet or something like that, and you could help them. Obviously, like we said, mental health is not visibly tangible. You can't touch it, can't smell it, can't feel it. So the thing that I felt that was missing, that I believe is missing, is that these other mental health stages that I came across throughout the years, and they weren't really, like, when I say stages, identifiable markers, they weren't something that like was akin to cancer, right? These stages all started with problems. They never started with the healthy place where someone should be. So for example, if you go to your doctor and you tell your doctor, say, hey, I'm going to do a full physical evaluation, everything, your doctor comes back and they say, okay, well, Let's say you're out of shape. Let's say you're overweight. Let's say you're pre-diabetic. You have all these types of things. They have to give you some sort of range of like, where is healthy for your age? And what does healthy even look like? Because some people may say, hey, healthy for me is having a six-pack. Other people may say healthy for me is just not having diabetes or managing my eating or getting good enough sleep, right? So there's got to be some sort of starting point. And unfortunately, in mental health, the starting point usually starts somewhere around where there's a significant identifiable problem. So in my stages, stage 1 starts out where you would want, or what's the ideal place for a youth or a teenager or youth to be at. So stage 1 says child/teen begins struggling. Okay, sorry. I'm totally screwing this up. Okay, you're going to have to cut that part out. Okay, and I'm going to say, so instead of starting at stage 1, we're going to start at stage 0. Stage 0 is where you want to be, where we want all of our kids to be. So here it goes. Stage 0, a child/teen has no major struggles with interpersonal relationships. Child/teen has fortified family, friend, and online relationships. Their self-worth comes from purposeful struggle and the ability to communicate needs. No signs of mental health symptoms whatsoever. Real quick, let me make a comment on the purposeful struggle. Brief definition of purposeful struggle is human beings don't do well when we don't have struggle. Now, I know everyone listening to this like, wait a second, I want to relax. I want to be chill. I want to just have a good time. Of course you do. But if you relax and chill and only have good times and you have no struggle, then you're probably not going to make any money. Those people who are blessed with a trust fund account with hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions of dollars, you are blessed and cursed at the same time because the struggle was removed from your life. So psychologically, unknowing to you, you will seek struggle. You will seek challenge. People only do good when they're focusing on being better and improving in something. You have to be moving forward towards something, or you're going to find yourself thinking like, do I even matter? Why am I even here? What's my purpose? If you're locked in and you have some sort of purpose that's greater than yourself and you're doing hard things for the benefit of other people, it could be for your family. Right? There's some kids out there that as soon as they're old enough to work, they got to go out and they got to get a job and they got to give the money to their family just so their family can survive. That's purposeful struggle. Other kids, maybe their life's pretty easy, but they become a part of a team. Maybe it's a sports team, maybe it's a performance team. And their struggle is maybe they don't really like sports that much, but they like their teammates. They like the people that they're with, and they don't want to let them down. So their purposeful struggle now comes to there's a purpose for them actually going to practice and training, doing the things they're supposed to do that's greater than themselves. For themselves, they may not even work that hard, but if they felt their team needed them or they're going to be of some sort of asset or help to the group, then they're going to work harder. So that's what purposeful struggle is. And in stage 0, there is lots of purposeful struggle. These aren't kids that are just sitting around waiting for life to give them another reel or another meme, and they're not just scrolling all day long. Now, you can scroll, you can be on social media, but if you don't have purposeful struggle, you're not going to know what you're supposed to do and what you offer to other people because you haven't struggled enough to find out. Everybody knows you learn a whole lot more from losses than you do wins. So stage 1, now we're getting leaning a little bit more towards the something's brewing in the background. Some problems are happening. So stage 1 says child/teen begins struggling with interpersonal relationships. Home life, friendships, grades, etc. start to decline. Child/teen may have trouble keeping up with family duties, social obligations, or personal responsibilities. You guys have seen this before. Grades start to slip a little bit. They're a little wonky. They're like, I don't really hanging out with my friends. Something's going on. Most people would identify this as depression. The problem with that is depression has a whole lot more that has to happen for a whole lot longer to be diagnosed with depression. You got to have a whole lot of symptoms that align with the characteristics and attributes of depression, and you got to have them for at least 6 months, right? So it's not like having something like this means that the kid's depressed. It just means there's a disturbance in the force, like something's wrong, something's not going the way it should be going. Okay, these stages 0 and 1. And also stage 2, these are all the stages, what I call social health stages. These are all identifiable markers, or as I like to refer to them, as notifications that their social health is out of balance, something is wrong. If the social health is not addressed, if things aren't implemented to help said teen or child or young one, then it will continue to get worse. If it continues to get worse, then it can turn into mental health problems. So stage 2 says child/teen struggles increase in frequency and severity. Child/teen feels as though they are losing control of their life and the ability to fulfill their roles at home. Ability to fulfill their roles at home, school, or work. Self-doubt increases drastically and mental health symptoms start appearing. Again, this is all still part of social health. These are not diagnosable mental health stages. That's why I wanted you guys to start off with where do we want our kids to be and slowly track on what tends to happen and the trends that happen when they start to go towards the direction of potentially having mental and emotional problems. Now, stage 3. Child-teens struggles disrupt day-to-day activities and roles. Parents, friends, teachers, coaches, etc. are concerned by child-teens' noticeable change in behavior/attitude. First signs of risk-taking behavior, self-harm, and suicidal thoughts or aggressive behaviors may be present. Referrals for professional help are given. Pretty self-explanatory, but stage 3 is where the mental health stages begins. Right there, that's where you know, okay, if referrals are given, higher level of care, treatment, more support, whatever the young person needs, that is where it all starts at stage 3. Now, stage 4, obviously the most severe one, child/teen experiences multiple symptoms at once, causing serious disruption in day-to-day life. Child/teen's behavior is unpredictable and their mental health is unstable despite professional help, treatment, hospitalizations. Serious risk-taking behavior, self-harm, and constant suicidal thoughts or violent actions are present. You guys, stage 4, this is the school shooter stage. I mentioned in the last podcast a few weeks ago where I talked about the young man who attempted to assassinate President Trump. When he was interviewed, or not him, when his classmates in his high school were interviewed, because he was just out of high school a couple years, I think, they said, I don't know if they told this to his face, but they said his nickname was the school shooter. They believed he'd be the kid that would come and shoot up the school. Obviously, they had no idea he would attempt to assassinate a president, but those are both heinous crimes. Those are both horrible things to try to take someone's life or multiple people's life. So stage 4 is not just for suicide, not just for severe mental health problems such as like bipolar and those types of things, addiction. It is also for school shooting. I share this with you guys because I wanted to end this podcast with the same thing that I left all the principals and that I'll be speaking again in the next month to other educators. I'm going to leave you guys with the same thing I left with them. Please use the words social health to describe every club, every organization, every event that you are attempting to accomplish at your school to bring the culture of your school to not just a safe place, but a place of growth, evolution, and improvement. The best, or not the best, but connection creates the best innovation. If everybody is connected on the same terminology, we can easily share information back and forth. We need to have these social stages as the way we communicate with other people who are not mental health professionals. Some of the stages I saw for mental health were like something you'd see on the back of a mental health clinician's door, a doctor's office door. It's like, oh, if you're depressed, this is what it looks like. If you're suicidal, this is what it looks like. Call somebody, right? This was not, those things were not made to communicate about where someone's at. This young man, Colt Gray, he was transferred. He went from one school to another school. According to the reports, a year ago, he was interviewed because he was expected to be a school shooter. They had thought that he was going to shoot up a school. A year later, he moves to a different school. And one of his social media platform handles was the same name of the young man who had shot up the high school at Sandy Hook. And if you're not familiar with the Sandy Hook shooting, go look that up.
You do say Sandy Hook Elementary School. That he had the same.
Okay.
He had the same username in Russian as the Sandy Hook shooter.
Okay. This young man had the same username on a social media platform in Russian as the same young man that was a Sandy Hook Elementary School shooter. If you're not familiar with Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, please go Google that and check that out. So it appears, I think you could make an assumption that he was idolizing, by using that handle, he was trying to associate himself, or idolizing or looking up, at least I think it's safe to assume, some sort of admiration for that person that shot up that elementary school. And then obviously he shot up this school. These are things, you guys, if schools were able to communicate, hey, listen, this kid's coming to your school. We identified he's a stage 3 kid. We have identified he's a stage 4 kid. Just identifying the stages, let's take the cancer analogy again. If you identify as someone that's in stage 4 of cancer, that identification that's given to by a professional can then help the parents, the family members, understand what treatment protocols, what facilities, what type of resources and support they're going to need. Every single stage, 1, 2, 3, obviously 0, you don't need anything, but 1, 2, 3, 4, these should all have resources, information that is ready to go as soon as this person is identified. So if you go from one school to another, if you go from one class to another, I'm a teacher in high school. If I saw an IEP that this kid is identified as a stage 3 kid, potentially stage 4 kid, I'm going to treat that kid differently. Yes, I mean, I'm going to treat that kid differently. I don't mean that I'm going to baby them, I'm going to coddle them, I'm going to be mean to them. I'm going to treat that kid differently because their stage identifies them as someone that needs to be treated differently. That doesn't mean I'm going to give them an A or like make class easy for them. I'm going to be more sensitive on my approach. I'm going to be more careful with my words because words do matter. I'm going to approach this young person. I'm going to give them support, maybe even a little extra support. I'm not going to treat them differently in like a way where I'm treating them like they're mentally handicapped. I'm going to be more cautious, more careful, more respectful, and I'm going to try to create a culture in my classroom so that they feel more comfortable. As I mentioned in my podcast a few weeks ago, kids don't shoot up schools that they have their friends at, they have a connection to, and they have people they love and care about there. I've never seen a school shooter autopsy. I've never seen a situation where the kid was beloved, had lots of friends, and had great social connections. It's always, 100% of the time, the complete opposite. You never hear the headlines saying, yeah, high school captain of the cheerleading squad or the soccer team shoots up the whole entire high school. Never has that happened. Last thing I want to share with you guys, I do not own social health. I do not attempt to corner the market with this terminology. I'm asking you guys to use this because we all have to agree on a label and a term. We know in education, we know in anything in life, we have to call something and everybody has to agree on it's going to be called. I love all the great work that every school out there in our country and probably other countries have been doing to improve the mental and emotional well-being of their student body. And at the same time, if all of our efforts, all of our moonshot things that we're trying to do to change the mental health, to change the culture of school, if all of those things that we're doing, the great work we're doing, is called different things, how can we collaborate? How can we easily share information? And the best way for me to describe that is we all need to call cancer, cancer. We all need to call math, math. If 100 hospitals out there in the country all called cancer something different, it'd make it very difficult to communicate, share knowledge and information, because we'd have different words and we may be confused on what exactly is being communicated. Also, same thing with math. How are you supposed to scale? How are you supposed to test? How are you supposed to show competency in something like math if in every school you go to, it was called something different? If you name it something different, you're more likely going to come up with different ways to do it. And those different ways may not really work well in other schools if they're doing it a completely different way. How are you supposed to scale it to be able to graduate from high school, and how are you supposed to scale it to be able to be proficient at it in college? It'll be damn near impossible if we do not agree on a term or terminology for what we're trying to achieve instead of just a terminology for the problem. Mental health, suicide, school shooting, they're all akin to one another. They're all connected and they're all part of the problem. Please consider using social health in your businesses, in your schools, in your organizations as an objective that you are trying to help your community, the people who are involved in what you're doing, by improving their social health. If we all use that same terminology, we can all benefit from the great ideas and understanding that will come from us being all on the same page. Because like I said earlier in the podcast a little bit ago, connection creates the best innovation. Going back to the chemistry comment, you're going to have better ideas if you have chemistry in the groups of people that you're working with, because you're going to work as one mind. Your chemistry is going to magnify your talents, your capabilities, your knowledge and information. It's not going to diminish them. So that's what I want to leave with you guys today. Thank you very much, as always, for listening to OG Therapy. If you have any questions about this, you can please DM me on Instagram. You can also reach out to me at Koz at OG, so KOZ at OGtherapyinc.com. I have not given out my email before. You can still hit me up at the old Light the Fight, David at Light the Fight email if you'd like to reach out to me on that email. But I just want to make sure that if you have thoughts, feelings, and opinions, that you can reach out to me in about a month from now. I'm not saying exactly 1 month from now, but hopefully before a month from now, we will have a much streamlined system so that we can be able to capture all your thoughts and feelings and information that you have about the feedback from my book, which I haven't started promoting yet, but it is out there. So if you want to go check out my book, go to Amazon. It's called Youth of the Nation. It's available on Audible. It's also available on in hard copy, and it's available on Kindle. I'm saving that for later in the month because when I start promoting my book, that means I'm ready to help you guys take all your information to see how we can get social health initiatives inside your schools, but also how we can get social health curriculum inside your schools, and probably even just as equally important, how we can get social health inside of your communities, your organizations, and potentially your state and our government. So until next time, you guys can check me out on David_KOZLOWSKI on Instagram. You can check us out on Patreon, which is www.patreon.com/OG Therapy. You can go to YouTube, OG Therapy. You can go to TikTok, OG Therapy Podcast. We don't have a lot of content on there yet. Not big on the TikTok yet, but we're getting there. And lastly, you can go on Instagram, OG.therapy. Is that correct? Can't remember the handle. OG.therapy on Instagram. And you guys just remember, when all the stress of what's going on in our country, the civil unrest, the politics, your work drama, family drama, children drama, whatever it is that's got you down on your knees saying, please, 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 just remember you can always press play and listen to your OGs. Until next time, be cool.